I always thought I had the perfect life, married to the woman I loved, with a steady job, a nice home, and two kids who were growing up too fast. Every evening we sat around the dinner table, passing plates of food and talking about the day. It was simple, but it felt right. My wife, Jennifer, would always ask how my day went, and I'd tell her about the small wins and frustrations at work. She'd tell me about the kids, what they did at school, or how they'd been acting. It was the kind of thing most people would take for granted, but I found peace in it. The small talk, the rhythm of it all, it was a kind of quiet comfort that settled over our home, like the soft hum of a well-oiled machine. And then, of course, there were the weekends, lazy Saturdays spent in our pajamas, watching cartoons with the kids, or taking them to the park. Evenings, just the two of us, after the kids had gone to bed. The simple things, making popcorn, watching our favorite shows, and talking about anything and everything. I had always believed that this was the life I wanted, the life I'd worked for. There were moments when everything seemed perfect, like when Jennifer would look at me across the table, smile that smile I had fallen in love with all those years ago, and I'd catch myself thinking, I've done good. This is my family, my life. We had the kind of love that was supposed to last forever, or so I thought. But slowly over time, I began to notice little things. Little shifts, like when Jennifer started spending more time on her phone, or when she seemed distracted during dinner. There were moments when I'd ask her a question, and she wouldn't quite hear me, or worse, she'd give me an answer that didn't make sense. It wasn't that she didn't care, I knew she did, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't the kind of thing I could put into words, it was just a sense, a gut feeling, that grew stronger as the days went on. I tried to ignore it. I thought maybe it was just the stress of life, raising kids, work piling up. Maybe I was overthinking it, being paranoid. Still, every once in a while I'd catch her staring off into space, or her smile would look a little too practiced. But I dismissed it. I had to. I didn't want to believe that anything was wrong. I wanted to believe in the illusion of the perfect family, in the quiet moments of everyday life that felt like everything I needed. The reality of it all, though, was a little more complicated. I didn't know it at the time, but that small nagging feeling was the first sign of the unraveling that was coming. There were little things that started to add up, but I didn't want to believe they meant anything. At first I thought it was just life, stress from work, the kids being more demanding, or maybe just the daily grind taking its toll. Jennifer had always been so loving, so attentive, but over time her moods started to shift. It was subtle at first, like when she'd come home from work and barely acknowledge me, or when I'd try to make small talk and she'd give me distracted answers. The affection that had once been so easy and natural between us began to fade. It wasn't that she was cold or distant, but it felt like she was always somewhere else. She didn't seem interested in the little things that used to make her laugh. I'd make a joke or share something funny from work, and she'd nod politely but wouldn't smile. That wasn't like her. She used to laugh at everything, even the stupid stuff. It wasn't just that, though. I began noticing that when I'd reach for her hand, she'd pull away slightly or avoid it altogether. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was tired, or maybe I was just imagining it. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more obvious it became. Then there was the phone. Jennifer always kept it face down on the kitchen counter. It wasn't a big deal at first, just something small I noticed in passing. But then it started happening more frequently. Whenever I'd ask who she was texting or if she could look something up for me, she'd hesitate before handing it over, her fingers nervously tapping on the screen. She never used to be like that. Her phone was always open, no secrets, no hiding. But now it felt like she was guarding it. I'd catch her quickly putting it down or switching to another app when I walked into the room. I started questioning it. Was I overthinking it? Was it just stress? After all, things had been chaotic lately, work had gotten busier for both of us, and the kids were getting older, with their own set of issues. I told myself it was just a phase, that she was probably just overwhelmed. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The easy smiles, the warmth between us, they were slowly disappearing, replaced by awkward silences and half-hearted responses. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I wasn't the type to let my mind wander. I wasn't the type to accuse or assume, but it was hard to ignore the growing sense of unease that started settling in my stomach. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were starting to build up, one after the other. The way she would stare off into space, the distant look in her eyes when I spoke to her, the phone that she now guarded like it was a lifeline. It was all starting to feel like something was slipping through my fingers. I just didn't know what yet, so I brushed it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid, I thought. Maybe I was just tired, or maybe she was. I tried to focus on the good moments, the ones that reminded me of the woman I married, but in the back of my mind, the doubt was creeping in, whispering that maybe things weren't as perfect as I had believed. I never saw it coming. It all happened in a flash, and I couldn't process it. It was an ordinary evening, nothing out of the usual. I had just come back from picking up groceries, the kids were at a friend's house, and the house was quiet. I thought Jennifer was in the living room, but when I walked past the door, I froze. I heard her voice, soft but clear, and the words hit me like a slap across the face. She was talking to someone on the phone, but the conversation didn't sound normal. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words were so loud in the silence of the house, I couldn't help but hear them. She was talking to her ex. At first, I didn't know how to react. I just stood there listening, my heart pounding, not able to move. She was laughing, talking about old times, and I was so confused because I hadn't heard her talk to him in years. And then I heard her say it, those words I would never be able to forget. Honestly, you're more of a man than he ever was. He doesn't even see me anymore. It felt like the floor dropped out from beneath me. I stood there frozen as if time had stopped. I didn't want to believe it, but the reality of those words was undeniable. She wasn't just talking to her ex, she was comparing him to me. The man I had been to her, the man I thought I was, had somehow failed in her eyes. I didn't know how to feel. Anger, disbelief, hurt. They all washed over me in waves, each one stronger than the last. I wanted to burst into the room and confront her, demand answers. But I couldn't. My legs felt like they were made of stone, and all I could do was stand there, listening. It was like I was hearing it from a distance, unable to comprehend what was happening. She kept going, oblivious to my presence. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe I thought it would get better. Maybe I hoped he'd see me. But he never really did, not the way you did. It was like a punch to the gut, and I could feel my chest tighten with every word she spoke. All the years we'd been together, the life we'd built, the love I thought was real, it was all being called into question in that one conversation. I had spent so many years being a good husband, thinking I was doing everything right, but hearing her say that, I felt like I had missed something. I had failed her. I could feel the betrayal eating at me, gnawing away at the foundation of everything I had believed. The more I stood there, the more the anger bubbled up. But it wasn't just anger at her, it was anger at myself. I felt like a fool. All this time I had been blind to what she truly thought, to what she truly wanted. She had given up on us, and I hadn't even known it. That moment was the turning point. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The reality of how she felt about me, about us, was undeniable. I had to face it no matter how much it hurt. The woman I loved didn't see me as the man she once did, and somehow I couldn't shake the thought that she was right. I wasn't enough, and that realization tore me apart. I felt the weight of everything hit me all at once. The betrayal, the hurt, the feeling of being so completely blindsided. It was like the floor had been pulled out from under me and I was falling. But as I stood there, letting the reality of what I just heard sink in, I started to feel something else. Anger. Not just hurt, but pure, raw anger. She had crossed the line, and in my mind, there was no going back. I couldn't let her get away with this, not just for my own sake, but for the sake of everything I thought we had. I knew deep down I had two choices. I could walk away, just pack up and leave, let her live with the consequences of what she'd done. But that didn't feel right. I wasn't just going to disappear without a trace, without making sure she understood the full weight of what she'd done. I wasn't going to just let her get off easy. No, I had to make her feel what I felt. If she thought her ex was more of a man than I was, then I was going to show her exactly what that meant. The idea of revenge came to me slowly, but once it did, it felt like a fire inside me, burning brighter with every passing second. I wasn't going to leave her hanging in the dark, wondering where I went. I was going to make sure she knew the pain she caused, but how? I started thinking about the little things, the ways I could turn the tables on her without her even knowing it was coming. It wasn't just about revenge in the traditional sense, it wasn't about shouting or yelling or making a scene. No, it had to be more subtle, more refined, something that would hit her hard, but not immediately. I wanted it to sink in slowly. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't the one she could walk all over. The first thing I did was pull back. I began to change my behavior, just enough to get her wondering, just enough to make her feel uncomfortable. I stopped being the man who'd cater to her needs, the man who would come home and ask about her day. I stopped asking about the kids, stopped engaging in the little things that made our relationship feel real. I'd leave the house without a word, go out with friends, stop answering her calls, but that wasn't enough. I needed to get inside her head. I needed to make sure that she understood just how badly she had messed up. So I started playing the game. I started getting close to someone else, someone who could make her jealous without her even knowing it. I didn't do anything physical. No, that wasn't necessary. Just enough to make her see that someone else was interested in me. A few casual conversations with a woman from work, a touch here and there. Nothing more, but enough to make Jennifer start to question things. I wanted her to feel the sting of what she had done, to understand that I wasn't just a man she could push aside. I had to make her realize that what she had with me wasn't disposable. But as I watched her begin to spiral, part of me began to wonder, was this worth it? Was this the person I wanted to be? The man who would hurt someone just as badly as they had hurt me? In the quiet moments, I felt the weight of it. I didn't want to destroy her. I wanted her to regret her choices. I wanted her to feel the same betrayal I had felt, but I didn't want to go so far that it would break us beyond repair. So I held back, just a little. There was still a part of me that loved her, still a part of me that wanted to fix things, but another part of me, maybe the part that had been hurt too much, wanted to see her suffer, to know the price of her actions. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my power, about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. I began to change things slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first it was small shifts in my behavior, nothing that would raise any immediate suspicion, but enough to create a noticeable distance between us. I stopped initiating conversations, stopped asking about her day, and made sure I was less available when she needed me. When she asked questions, I gave short answers, just enough to keep her from probing deeper. I knew she would notice the change, but I made sure it was subtle enough that she couldn't point to anything specific. I stopped complimenting her, which had been a natural part of our routine. The little things, like telling her she looked nice or asking how she was doing, disappeared. It was like I was pulling back emotionally, but without giving her an explanation. She started to seem confused, unsure of where she stood, but I never gave her a reason to ask outright. I didn't give her anything to work with. Then I took it a step further. I started spending more time away from home, going out with friends, staying late at work, or just taking long drives. I was careful to avoid coming home too late or making it look too obvious, but I made sure she knew I was out of the house. Each time she would ask where I had been, and I'd answer with something vague, not bothering to elaborate. It was like I was making myself a stranger to her in our own home. The tension between us grew. She started trying harder, asking me what was wrong, even making more of an effort to cook dinner or plan things to do as a family. But it felt forced. Her efforts didn't reach me. The more she tried, the less I responded. It was like a game, and I could see her squirming under the weight of her uncertainty, unsure of what was happening or what she was supposed to do next. I kept things just uncomfortable enough that she couldn't ignore the changes, but I didn't let her fully confront me. I knew she would be questioning herself, wondering where things went wrong, but I made sure she didn't have a clear answer. She couldn't figure out what had changed, why I was pulling away. She didn't know it, but I was slowly drawing her into a place where she felt more vulnerable with every passing day. The tension grew, and it felt like I had all the control. I watched her try to fix things, but the harder she worked, the more I let her struggle without offering a resolution. This was just the beginning, and I was in no rush to make her understand what was really happening. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I wanted her to sweat a little, to feel that discomfort, because she needed to understand what it felt like to be uncertain, to be left in the dark. As the days passed and my calculated distance took effect, I began to see changes in her. Jennifer was trying, really trying. She made attempts to engage me, setting up dinners I used to like, suggesting movies we used to watch together. Sometimes, late at night, I could hear her moving around in the house, restless, maybe waiting up for me, maybe hoping for a moment where things felt normal again. But with each effort she made, I responded with cool detachment. It was a game of revenge, a script I was writing in real time, each scene meticulously crafted to make her feel the loss and confusion I felt. Yet, as I watched her falter, watched her try to bridge the gap I was widening between us, something in me began to shift. The satisfaction I expected to feel, the vindication, where was it? Instead, there was this growing pit in my stomach, a hollow feeling that seemed to expand with every cold interaction. I lay awake at night, her beside me, the physical distance a mere metaphor for the emotional chasm that had formed. I listened to her breathing, slow and steady, but somehow no longer familiar. I was pushing her away, yes, but at what cost? Her confusion, her pain, it was supposed to make me feel justified, strong. Instead, I felt weaker, smaller with each passing day. She would look at me, her eyes searching for the man she married, the man who used to look back at her with warmth. Now there was just this emptiness. It was like looking into a mirror and not recognizing the reflection. Who had I become? The idea of revenge, so clear and justifiable in the heat of betrayal, now felt like a poison seeping through my veins. It was consuming me, changing me into someone I no longer recognized. I had wanted to hurt her, to make her feel a fraction of the pain her words had cost me. But living in a house with someone you are actively trying to punish, sharing meals, sharing a bed, it wasn't a battleground. It was torture, self-inflicted and relentless. Every part of me wanted to shout at her, to release the storm of accusations and hurt. But what would that achieve? Would it heal the wounds, or would it simply deepen them? As the man who had once promised to protect her, to love her, I found myself at a crossroads. Could I continue on this path of retribution, knowing it led nowhere good, knowing it might irreparably break what little we still shared? This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about me, my integrity, my peace of mind, my heart. I realized that this revenge was not a pathway to healing, but a detour into deeper bitterness. The price was too high, the cost too great. It wasn't just about losing her, it was about losing myself. I had to make a choice. Continue down this path of cold vengeance, or find a way to confront the issue, to really talk, to maybe, just maybe, find a path to forgiveness. For her, for me, for us. Was there enough left between us to save? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this, trapped by my own anger, haunted by my own decisions. It was time to break the cycle. Reaching that boiling point was inevitable. After all the cold nights, the silent dinners, the unmet glances that used to speak volumes, the decision came not with a roar, but with a sobering, quiet clarity. It was a calm realization. I had to leave, not in the explosive, dramatic way that scenes like this are often painted, but quietly, disappearing without a trace, leaving no room for bargaining or dramatic reconciliations. The idea formed fully one morning. After yet another sleepless night, I lay there, the early light creeping through the blinds, casting lines across the bedroom floor, and I knew. I didn't want to drag this out any longer. The plan was simple: vanish completely, leave everything behind, and ensure there was no way for Jennifer or anyone else to follow. No goodbyes, no explanations, nothing but the silence and space I so desperately needed. It wasn't just about escaping her or the suffocating atmosphere at home. It was about finding peace, about rescuing whatever was left of my dignity and self-worth. I had given so much of myself in trying to make her see me, in trying to be the man she wanted, and in the end, none of it mattered. She had made her feelings clear, and now I needed to accept the reality that things would never go back to how they were. The logistics were straightforward. I started by quietly moving money into a new account, enough to get me started wherever I decided to go. I rented a small storage unit under an assumed name to store a few personal items I couldn't bear to part with. Important documents, a few keepsakes, the kind of things that meant something only to me. Next, I slowly began to erase my digital footprint. I deactivated social media accounts, unsubscribed from services, and eventually disposed of my current phone. I purchased a burner phone, something untraceable, that would serve me until I settled somewhere new. As the days counted down, I found myself watching Jennifer, watching our lives from a detached perspective. I saw her trying, in her way, to bridge the gap that had widened between us. Part of me felt a pang of guilt for what I was about to do, for the mess I would leave behind, but I squashed it down. This was necessary, not just for my happiness, but for my sanity. The night before I left, I walked through our home one last time. I looked at the pictures on the walls, the little imperfections in the decor we had chosen together, the life we had built. It was like walking through a museum of my own life, each room a reminder of a different chapter, some joyous, others painful. But they were all in the past now. By the time I walked out the door the next morning, it was with a suitcase in one hand and a heavy heart. But there was also a sense of relief, of unburdening. I drove away without looking back, the rising sun ahead of me, not just a marker of time, but a symbol of the new beginning I was driving toward. Wherever I ended up, I knew it would be a place where no one knew my name or my history, a place where I could start over, maybe even find happiness again. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, but it was a road I had to take. For the first time in a long time, I was in control of my destiny, and that alone was worth everything. The decision to vanish wasn't made lightly. It came as the culmination of countless sleepless nights, of turmoil so intense it felt physical. Each step was calculated, a silent move in a game that only I was playing. Walking away was about reclaiming something lost along the way, my peace, my self-respect, my ability to look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back at me. This choice to disappear without a word left a mixture of relief and heaviness in my chest. It wasn't just about leaving a place that had become suffocating or a relationship that had soured beyond recognition. It was about stepping into the unknown, into solitude, and finding solace in the absence of conflict. The act of leaving without a goodbye, without an explanation, meant that I was also leaving behind the man I had become, someone I no longer wanted to be. In the quiet that followed my departure, there was a profound sense of liberation, the kind of quiet that isn't just absence of noise, but a presence of peace. Each mile I drove, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter, the air easier to breathe. There was no second guessing, no looking back. It was a forward motion into a life that offered a fresh start, a blank slate. This peace was hard-earned. It came at the expense of a shared history, of a family I had once thought would be forever. But as the road stretched out before me, I realized that this peace was also a testament to my resilience, to my ability to take control of my own narrative. It was a sign that despite everything, I could choose my path, one that led away from heartache and towards healing. As I embraced the solitude, I understood that this journey wasn't just about physical distance. It was about emotional and psychological freedom. It was about finding a space where I could be alone with my thoughts without interruption, without the need to justify or explain my feelings to anyone. This newfound silence was not empty. It was full of potential, of whispered promises of new beginnings. It was a chance to rediscover parts of myself long buried under the obligations and roles I had played. Here, in the quiet, I could hear my own voice clearly for the first time in years. It guided me, encouraged me, reminded me that I was more than what I had been in those final days at home. The decision to vanish was a declaration of independence, a way to press reset not just on my location, but on my identity. It was a bold move, a definitive line drawn that said, here is where I start anew. In this quiet, in this peace, I found the strength to rebuild, to redefine, and to start again, knowing that this time I was building a life not on the expectations of others, but on my own terms. Months after making the sharp turn into a new life, the reality of complete detachment had settled in, ingrained in every day that dawned. Freedom, a concept once tethered to dreams of escape, had now been realized, yet it came with a lingering shadow of the past. It was during these moments of quiet solitude that thoughts of the old life, the life abruptly left behind, began to echo louder than before. The process of disconnecting had been systematic, almost clinical, but emotions are not swayed by such methods. They linger, resilient and sometimes unbidden. The sudden jolt from married life to solitude hadn't erased the years of companionship, conflict, and care that had defined that chapter. Memory, a relentless companion, replayed both the tender and tense moments with indiscriminate clarity. In the silence of the new environment, reflections on the choice to enact revenge surfaced frequently. Was it truly vindication, or was it a desperate grab for control in a situation where everything felt unmanageable? These questions mulled over in the quiet hours of the morning, wrestling with the understanding of whether the peace achieved was genuine or simply the absence of conflict. Each time his phone buzzed with an attempt from Jennifer to reach out, a choice presented itself: to engage, to explain, to confront the unresolved threads dangling between the reality of now and the memories of then. Yet each outreach was met with silence, not out of spite or a need to punish, but from a necessity to maintain the boundaries that had been so hard to establish. Watching her reach out, knowing the confusion and possibly the pain it cost, was not without its toll. There was no pleasure in knowing the distress that might be unfolding on the other end of those unanswered calls. Had revenge been the right answer? Initially it felt justified, almost righteous, but with distance and time, the clarity of isolation brought into question the real impact of such actions. Revenge had provided a momentary sense of satisfaction, a quick burn that seemed to cauterize the wounds of betrayal. However, the slow, persistent ache of regret began to suggest that perhaps healing was more about forgiveness than retaliation. Moving on was not as simple as changing locations or shutting down lines of communication. It was a deeper, more laborious process. It involved untangling the tightly wound threads of past identity, of relational dynamics, and of self-perception. It involved facing the days when loneliness crept in like a cold mist, dampening the newfound freedom with the chill of isolation. Yet there was a burgeoning sense of self that began to take root. Untethered from the expectations and the turmoil of the previous relationship, there was space to rediscover who he was outside of that context. New hobbies, new routines, and new interactions slowly painted the canvas of daily life with brighter hues. The liberation from a toxic relationship had allowed for an exploration of potential that was previously stifled. As time marched on, the reflection on whether revenge had been necessary began to fade into the background, replaced by a focus on rebuilding and redefining a life that was solely his own. The journey of healing was proving to be longer and more complex than the act of leaving, but it was imbued with a sense of authenticity and growth that revenge could never have provided. Over time, the sharp edges of betrayal and hurt dulled, smoothed by the continuous passage of days filled with new routines and reflections. The decision to disappear, once a desperate leap into the unknown, now stood as a pivotal moment of reclaiming personal power and peace. The initial turmoil that accompanied the act of vanishing had gradually given way to a quieter, more introspective existence where the space to breathe and be was valued more than the chaotic interactions of the past. In this newfound solitude, the lessons learned started to crystallize. It became apparent that while the escape was physical, the real journey was emotional. A trek through the rugged terrain of personal grievances, through valleys of loneliness, and over peaks of self-discovery. Each step away from the past was a step toward a deeper understanding of self-worth and the importance of mental and emotional well-being. The act of cutting ties, once perceived as a cold revenge, had morphed in memory into a necessary act of self-preservation. It was a declaration that emotional abuse and neglect were no longer tolerable, and that the respect I owed myself was long overdue. The silence that had once been a weapon in the arsenal of revenge now served as a peaceful sanctuary from the noise of dysfunctional relationships. Engaging in introspection, I recognized the cost of staying in a relationship where mutual respect and understanding were casualties of familiarity and contempt. This acknowledgement didn't erase the pain or regret, but placed them in a context that fostered forgiveness. Forgiveness not just for her, but crucially for myself. Forgiving her for the hurt she caused, and forgiving myself for the role I played in the prolonged dance of our unhappy union. Moreover, moving on wasn't just about physical distance or creating a new identity. It was about emotional and psychological growth. It involved embracing the vulnerabilities that came with starting over and the strength that was required to face them head on. It was about learning to trust again, not just in others, but in my own decisions and feelings. As I forged new connections, slowly letting people into my life, the value of honest, transparent communication became evident. Relationships were now built not on the shaky foundations of past insecurities, but on the solid ground of mutual respect and clear boundaries. The peace that came with this new approach was profound. It was the peace of knowing that I could handle whatever came my way because I was no longer burdened by unresolved emotional chaos. In looking back, the journey from the moment of betrayal to the present was long and often difficult, but every challenge faced and overcome proved that moving on was the right decision. There was no final destination in healing, no complete resolution to the wounds of the past, but there was progress and there was hope. The sense of closure didn't arrive as a sudden revelation, but as a gradual acceptance that life goes on, enriched, not diminished by the experiences that test us. Now, with the clarity of hindsight and the calmness of emotional maturity, I can genuinely say I am on a better path. A path not free of obstacles, but one that I navigate with a renewed sense of purpose and self-assuredness. The decision to leave it all behind was, without doubt, the most challenging and the most rewarding of my life. It restored my belief in the possibility of a happier, healthier future, one that I shape with intent and insight,